And are we live? I have to move. Might have to move these. Okay. Right. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Even though the weather was going to be treacherous, the sun shines brightly on turfs at Reformers Tree. And so thank you very, very much for coming. I know for some people the threat of, the wind for my kind of hair is not great, but the threat of rain really does put some people off. But the march against women continues, and so I feel, just one moment, caller. Take your time. Big lorries going by, big lorries. Just going to wait, there's some sort of, I think it's a turf wonderland is coming. So we decided to come here on Halloween because, I don't know about you, but it feels all a little bit familiar, this reframing women as something dehumanized, which means it's really easy to pick us off as people that can easily be victimized and silenced. And obviously over the last week we've seen Kathleen Stock feel that she had no other choice but to resign. So a job that she truly loved, she has felt pushed out, and she was very magnanimous in her praise of the university. But frankly, I think they were very silent for a really long time, and I don't feel all that comfortable about children being there, or certainly our children being there in a climate where they don't feel that if they don't agree with the trans women are women cult, they cannot speak. Two of my kids have gone off to university this year, and for one of them, he couldn't, as a white, straight male, he couldn't attend about 40% of the university's offerings for Freshers Week because he wasn't LGBTQI+, and he wasn't a person of colour. And so just this kind of, this gentle segregation of our kids, rather than bringing them all together and making sure that they integrate with all kinds of kids. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We've got balloons here today, and one lady did say she was a little bit concerned about the popping, and now they've all started. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But as opposed to the integration of our kids, we are separating them. We're making them feel that if they're not the same, they are other. Now, I thought we'd given that up. I thought we'd try to ingratiate everybody into the kind of the common culture, and clearly other people, different groups have different needs, but generally speaking, do we really need an LGBT bit of the police, a Muslim bit of the police, a black bit of the police, or do we just actually need police? Do we just actually need students? Do we just actually need kids at school rather than even 11-year-olds being, bloody hell, that was such a bad idea, being coerced into an LGBTQIA, let's remember that what that really means is T, society at school. This is not about the acceptance or the support of lesbian, gay and bisexual pupils. This is merely the promotion of pupils so-called transgender. So I think it's really important that we keep naming this stuff. So we've got Kathleen Stocks resigned, we've got the new LGBT, used to be called gay conversion therapy, they've diluted that into LGBT conversion therapy, which as far as I can see from reading it, could mean you criminalise a teacher who goes along with pronouns and the gender identity so-called of a pupil, and also you could criminalise a psychologist who's trying to help a girl who's in deep distress, who may think she's a boy. It's so ambiguous, but it's all right because in the government consultation into LGBT conversion therapy, they didn't actually explain what conversion therapy actually was. It simply says We just didn't, it might mean physical punishment, it might mean abusive language, but it's conversion therapy, full stop. And then I fail to see what conversion therapy has to do with transgenderism. Certainly the conversion of our children in conflict into feeling that there is a solution by saying and calling themselves trans, as if that is a one-size-fits-all resolution for whatever it is they're suffering, whether they have internalized homophobia, whether they have an autism diagnosis, whether they simply just don't fit in with everybody and they are being groomed online. So it's really important that we met today. We obviously all know the tales of witches. I don't know whether I'd float or not these days, but time immemorial, men have found a way to silence women, usually quite effectively, and 2021 is no different from the rest of history. So I implore every single one of you to come and speak. You can speak about what you like. You may be heckled. It's not that usual, but perhaps we should encourage it. So speak about what you like, your ideas, whatever you want to say. This is Speaker's Corner. We may not all agree, but I'm sure we agree with the right of everybody here. Someone's brought some Turnix tea cakes. I'm sure it's the agreement of everybody here that everybody has a right to speak and everybody has a right to disagree with those ideas that are put forward here. So anyway, on that note, hi Georgia, hi. Oh, who would like to speak? By the way, if you haven't got a balloon or a badge, do come and see me.
Okay, how do I wear this?
Oh, Speaker's Corner.
Does it?
Free speech for women.
Does it just go there?
Hashtag free speech for women. Yeah.
Just say there?
Yeah.
Okay, is that working?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Okay, I am Kat Howard on Twitter. And this week I was one of the women who was featured in the BBC News article about the assault on lesbians by trans-identified males. Thank you. So my story was Chloe's. When I was at university, I was assaulted by a trans woman who took very much advantage of the fact that at the time I was incredibly intoxicated, to the point where I do not believe that my consent could have been willingly given. After that, 2 more lesbians in my society were raped by this same individual. I couldn't, as a result of that, access my LGBT society, because I couldn't go and face this person who went around the society and spread that actually I was a TERF slut as a result of what happened. This person was only at the university for 6 months, so in 6 months they assaulted 3 lesbians within that society. And we only had, in my year, 4 lesbians in the LGBT. The society was largely made up of bisexual women. And so we were very clearly targeted here. This was a targeting of lesbians by this individual. If this individual had physically assaulted us, had picked 3 lesbians and hit us, that would have been a hate crime. Instead, this week, as we've all seen, the backlash has been against us. We've been the ones being deemed anti-trans or transphobic or lying or spreading hatred, to the point where I think 12 to 15,000 people have signed a letter condemning the BBC for telling our story. And it took a lot to give this interview. It's taken a lot to see all of this backlash that's been there. There's also been a huge amount of support, which I'm really, really grateful for. But what I'd really, really like to ask is that everybody continues really to stand with lesbians. That we need to keep the word lesbian for homosexual females. It is not an umbrella term. It is certainly not a term you can use if you are a male. No matter how how you identify, you are not a female, you cannot be a lesbian, and lesbians do not in any way date or have sexual interest in males, and we need to keep pushing for that, to stay lesbians. That is our word, and these need to be our spaces, because I do not want any other young lesbians to go through what I went through. Sheba.
They go in there. I've met one.
Yeah, Sheba lets males in, just straight up men. Yeah, we need to fight against that, you know, and I think that takes us all working together. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. So as a juggernaut comes by, we can reflect on the juggernaut of transgenderism marching through our lesbian-only spaces and bodies. Well, just wait a minute. Who else would like to speak? Can I just say, sorry about the balloons.
I like the juggernaut of transgenderism, yeah, brilliant.
What a lovely sweatshirt.
Well, hello everybody. What a lovely gathering of witches, and no dinosaurs today, but I'm sure they're here in spirit, as it were. Whoever thought that tea cakes would become a political weapon or message? Thank you very much to the guy who's handing out tea cakes. It's lovely to see some men here supporting us. It's nice that they feel that they're able to come and support us without perhaps taking over, which is nice. Nice that they're doing that. I have got some goodies to give away completely at random. So I'm plugging the Critic magazine. In this issue of the Critic is Josephine Bartosh, a wonderful lesbian journalist, David Starkey, Julian Vigo, all talking about gender issues, supporting Kathleen Stott. Anybody first to put their hand up gets this copy of this weekend's Critic. There you go.
Thank you.
Read it on the train going back or something, and yeah, and that is rapidly becoming our outlet actually, in the real world. It's in WH Smith's, so it's not just online. Highly recommend it. As everybody knows, I was cancelled early last year from the Morning Star. Boo. Yeah. But you know, the Morning Star, to be fair to them, they did a good report on the Philia conference, fair play, and I am still friends with some of the journalists there. I don't blame them for what happened to me at all. They were piled on by trans activists within the trade union movement. But since that time, obviously, we've seen other people be cancelled that are in the arts, in my line of work, which is cartooning. I just want to mention, I'm not going to go into great detail, but I want to mention a couple of names. Just this October, Michael Leunig in Australia, he's been with his newspaper for over 50 years, just been cancelled for a cartoon. Earlier this year it was Xavier Gorset at Le Monde. I wrote an article about him from Common Ground Media, cancelled over an allegedly transphobic cartoon. Nina Paley, those of you that are on Spinster, the great animator and cartoonist, has just told us that she's been cancelled again from a film festival. I don't know any more about it. We're waiting for her to explain what's happened, and so that we know what the response is. This sort of thing is happening all the time, not because of what's in our work, but because of association and the mob mentality. I've just been censored again for a cartoon. I do have a regular outlet. They glorify themselves with the name uncancelled.co.uk, but they don't always live up to it. And so I did a cartoon about the 10-year anniversary of celebrity paedophile Jimmy Savile, which was on Friday. It was 10 years since his death. Those of you who don't know much about him, I would really encourage you to go online and look up the documentaries about what actually happened at that time, and how the BBC covered up what was happening, how Broadmoor Hospital covered up what was happening, how lots of people were in the know, both high in society and at low levels. You can slightly, you can feel sorry for the people at low-level jobs. They would have been afraid of losing their jobs, but you know, he made connections all the way up the tree to the royal family and Parliament and everywhere. It was absolute awful what happened, and people are still living with the repercussions. His victims, you know, are still living with it today. So I would advise you to look that up if you don't know much about it. I did a cartoon about it, which I assumed they were going to use, and they came back and said, so I did him. You might all know that down here in BBC, Shepherd's Bush, there's a statue on the front of their building by Eric Gill, a notorious paedophile, and it shows, it's a classical sculpture, shows an old man with a naked young child standing in front of him. Everybody knows that is on the front of the BBC. There has been campaigns to take it down. 38 Degrees has got a petition out on the internet at the moment asking for that statue to come down. I'm a free speech advocate. I'm not in favour of tearing down statues, but that particular one, I'm definitely in favour of tearing that one down. So, so my cartoon shows Savile as that statue with the child in front of him. And it shows our new culture secretary, Nadine Dorries, and regardless of what political party she's in, she is an absolute, she's a heroine, you know, and she is taking lumps out of the BBC left, right and centre, and they are terrified of her, absolutely terrified. This whole thing about dropping out of the Stonewall scheme, you know, the Martin Bashir scandal, losing 2 million licence fees a year, a lot of this is because she's come on the scene, and they are terrified about the licence fee negotiations. So fair play to her. So she's in my cartoon hammering away at it with a hammer and chisel, and all these chunks are flying out. Now to me, that cartoon doesn't seem particularly controversial. Everybody knows about that statue. My outlet came back to me and said, we'll use it, but can we lose the child? In other words, the main point of the cartoon, the main point of the child. So obviously I sent them a photo of the statue. I said, well, that is kind of the point. Yeah. But, you know, they wouldn't. I said, well, no. So they didn't want to use it, so that wasn't used. So obviously I've published it on Spinster and on my own website. But this is what is happening all the time. Publishers are terrified of, I don't know what of, because even when they're setting themselves up as an alternative media, they're still frightened to a legitimate journalistic comment. And the one thing I want to finish with is only yesterday we heard a horrible case in Hawaii, a 10-year-old schoolgirl, and this is no joke, it sounds like a joke but it isn't, was being bullied by another child in the class, and instead of retaliating like some kids would, with violence or running screaming to the teacher, she drew a cartoon of the other kid. She drew a picture, childish picture. And what was the reaction? Call the police. So the parents of the bully persuaded the school to call the police. This 10-year-old child, little black girl, was put in handcuffs, arrested, took to police station, interrogated, all without her parents' knowledge. And the ACLU, which we've got a lot of complaints about the ACLU from our side of the fence, but they are supporting the family, good thing too. Now, clearly they didn't pursue any charges, but that little girl could be traumatised for years. Their family could be traumatised. That shows me in dramatic form the power of a cartoon. You know, clearly it wasn't a scribble, it was a drawing that was good enough that people could actually get whatever the meaning was of it. And what was the reaction? Police, arrest, interrogation, down to the police station. That's a 10-year-old child. Now maybe that girl will never pick up a pen and do a drawing again, but maybe she will, and maybe she'll go on to be a cartoonist and an artist, and I bloody hope she does, because if she doesn't, what a loss that will be to the world, what a loss that will be to art. So, you know, that is on the internet. I encourage you to have a look at that story. The ACLU are supporting that family. Right, I've got a couple more things to give away. Who is having a Halloween party with children over this next couple of... Yes? Well, as you've stuck your hand in the air.
Yeah, no, my children are too old. Give it to
little children.
Younger children.
Has anybody got little children in the family? Nieces, nephews? You've got some nieces, mate. Have they got little children? I'm inviting the executioner to come forward. Have you got little children in your family?
No, my nieces are all in their 20s.
Yeah, but have you got like...
No.
Anybody got little children in the family? Yeah.
My grandparents are all of them. Yeah.
Tell me this isn't the end of humanity, that none of you are breeding. Yeah, you don't need to show your face, mate.
No, I'm not happy. I just came around your family.
Well, this is my Turf Witch cartoon, and it's for children to colour in at Halloween.
Thank you very much.
There you go, mate. And the other thing I'd like to give away, just to the nearest people, I'm just going to pick you at random. These are some postcards that have been made of my cartoons for a woman who's publishing a book about feminism in films. I'm just going to hand them out at random.
Thank you very much.
And I'm going to hand a copy of my book to the first person that puts their hand in the air. Right, okay, there you go. So thank you for listening to me, and support cartoonists, support artists. We are on the front line of journalism. We are the ones that they take aim at because we're the most visible. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you.
Sorry if I went on a bit.
Stella is sponsored by the adulthumanfemale.store, where you can buy her wonderful hat and hoodie. Anybody else? Yes, come on. It's up to you whether you say what your name is and where you come from.
Thank you. My name's Louise, I'm from Sheffield. I've wrote some stuff down this time. I was really overexcited last time and I didn't make any sense at all, I'm sorry. So this is what I think. Why I think this is happening. We haven't yet gained our humanity. Only in a world where we are not recognised with our humanity can a judge allow this bullshit to carry on that's happening in prisons. They think it's lawful. It's only lawful and it's only humane if you consider the humanity of a man, but you do not consider the humanity of a woman. This is incredibly serious. That's why this is happening. Every single institution that's has fell because they didn't bother to ask a woman, because we're not important, because we still not are considered fully human. At least in some other countries they admit that. At least they say you are worth half a man. It takes two of you and it takes witnesses, etc. Bullshit, blah blah. Anyway. Anyway, what I'm saying is we have to be really brave. We're the Cassandras. We're the ones that are doomed to be persecuted, are doomed to be ditched by people that used to love us. We've all lost friends, family members, people hate us, other women hate us. That's all right. We've got to be strong enough to fight for all those people that still hate us. Whatever they do, whatever they say, we've just got to carry on. So we need to be really brave and we need to encourage each other and support each other where we can. And that's going to take a little bit of fighting talk. I do that for myself, stand in front of the mirror and give myself a bit of a fighting talk, and I think that, and it helps me and I think it might help others. So this is what I want to say. A war's been declared. A war we didn't ask for. We didn't declare it. Squalid men declared it. Squalid weak men who in eons past might have been thrown off the top of Mount Taygetus. Interlopers in women face. Interlopers who mean to take everything from us. They will lose this war. These men think us weak. They think we'll pull out a chair for them. They think we'll keep silent, avert our eyes, block our ears, hand over our children, leave our sisters behind. They will lose this war. We are strong. We hold the line. Our shields protect everybody. We will come back with it or on it. We will give nothing. We will take from them everything. We will win this war. We will not quit in the midst of struggle. No retreat, no surrender. We birthed you, all of you. Now we mean to discipline you. Moron Labe, motherfuckers. Molan Labby. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well done. Okay. Anybody else? Oh. Hello. Hi. Let me just. Thanks very much.
Great. So, I wanted to talk briefly about the t-shirt I'm wearing and the lovely George Orwell. 2 + 2 = 4. And everything comes back to that, because 2 and 2 doesn't equal 5. 5 is an odd number, 2 and 4 are even numbers. Odd numbers are not even numbers. We're accused of hatred for not allowing men to be women. We didn't make those rules. Men are not women. It's like if you took the periodic table, iron is not 1. You don't get to swap the atomic numbers around because you feel like it. The love question, we should all have a question. The love question, mine, is a burger still vegan if you put dead animals in it? So what happens to a woman's space if men are allowed in? The concept, the meaning and everything of it is destroyed. The minute a man is in a woman's space, it isn't a woman's space. It's not hatred, it's just simple facts. And as for hatred, you should see well, we've all had the hate online. We get sent porn, rape threats, the most vilest things said about our bodies. That is hatred. Putting rapists in women's prison, defending rape, the vilest people of society are in this movement. They defend rape, they defend child porn and paedophiles and campaign for their rights over the rights of those being abused. Why can't we hate them? They're fucking disgusting. I'm done.
Thank you. Thanks for talking. Okay, we need more people to speak because yay! Good. Thank you. I'm going to put it here because it's a bit.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Chloe.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
So, today is Halloween, a day on which we traditionally make fun of and ridicule the things that people are most afraid of. And so, with that in mind, good afternoon. Bodies with vaginas, people with cervixes, gestational carriers, birthing parents, chest feeders, menstruators, stroppy menopausal types, and gentlemen. I'm Paula, unless there's anybody listening who happens to believe in this gender woo-woo nonsense, in which case those people can call me Dr. Boddington. And if I insist on my title, it's not just for my own sake, it's on behalf of women across the world and throughout history whose voices have been silenced and who have not been taken to be speaking with authority, even when they are speaking about their own experience. I'm an academic philosopher. I'm Associate Professor of Philosophy and Healthcare at the University of West London, and I would like to take this opportunity to extend my best wishes for health and happiness to Kathleen Stock and her family. About 2,500 years ago, the philosopher Socrates was sentenced to death in Athens on 2 charges. Firstly, of corrupting the youth, and secondly, of impiety against the gods. Kathleen Stock has been bullied out of her post on the same 2 charges. Firstly, on the charge of corrupting the youth, when in actual fact she was doing the exact reverse, attempting to prevent the youth from being corrupted by teaching them to think, to argue, to listen and to debate. But most importantly, for 20th century impiety, for failing to respect the modern gods of transgender ideology. And by the way, in case there are any morons listening, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the ideology. But this particular modern god is actually panicking a bit because they're sweeping away the fundamentals of our society, in fact of any society, the metaphysical distinction between male and female, from which all life follows. And of course, as a famous comedian said recently, every single human being on the planet came into this world through the legs of a woman, which is probably why it is the concept of women that's being most attacked, and why it's individual women who are being most attacked. We know that the ideologies of transgenderism are modern gods requiring our slavish worship because no argument is ever given. We simply have to assume the truth of trans ideology as absolute and not to be questioned. Those males claiming to be women simply have to assert this on the basis of some unfathomable revelation. It is those who try to argue and reason and produce evidence, like Kathleen Stock does, who are mocked, abused, insulted, punished, who are driven out into the desert as scapegoats. A friend who is also a philosopher, who lives in Australia, has emailed me a couple of times this weekend expressing outrage at what has happened to Kathleen Stock and expressing concern for Holly Lawford-Smith, a philosopher at the University of Melbourne, who has had some similar problems. The extent of this situation of clampdowns on academic freedom, I think, is made worse and more visible if it happens in philosophy, because this should be the discipline, above all else, of argument. Many philosophers, in fact, have the most outrageous and bizarre views, and yet continue in their posts with impunity. Some philosophers signed a letter in support of Kathleen Stock, but many didn't, and we read that amongst those are some of her cowardy custard colleagues at Sussex. However, there are some who considered the matter and actually decided not to sign because they were in positions in universities where they might be able to have some positive influence, but feared that if they signed, they'd be ousted from those positions. I don't blame them for making that judgment call, but what is absolutely shameful that the situation is arising in universities. So this has given me pause for thought about why certain philosophers are being so viciously attacked and the nature of the attacks. Of course, much of the attack has taken place over social media, and it's the power of the social media mob which is behind the erosion of thought and the rise of the gutless wonders who have turned groupthink into a religion. Stock has asked people to read her book so that they know what she really thinks. This is all very well and good, and indeed I'm glad to see that her book is selling so well it's out of stock in many booksellers. But this will never solve the social media problem, where the truth need not be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but needs only a whisper and a hint of wrongthink. So this week, in light of Kathleen Stock's resignation, and in light of the recent furore about the cotton ceiling, I finally broke down and I spent £17.99 on Amir Srinivasan's book, The Right to Sex, which of course is actually a deliberately provocative title because she doesn't think there is a right to sex. So I was wondering, why can Amir Srinivasan discuss feminist ideas and yet not receive the vitriol reserved for Stock and others? And indeed, she's actually lauded in the media on both sides of the Atlantic. Her work is lavishly praised. So this is what I wanted to know. And in particular, Srinivasan is Chitelli Professor of Social and Political Philosophy at All Souls College, Oxford, which is one of the most prestigious philosophy posts in the world, a post previously held by, for example, Isaiah Berlin. So this alone makes it worth looking at what she says, simply because she's in a position to have such influence. Now, I don't have time to give a full account. I'm actually not at all impressed with the book, which is largely based on accounts of second wave feminism and on what some of her students have said in her classes. It contains what I think are very dubious lines of evidence and is full of rhetorical questions and assumptions. So one of the things that she's doing is often asking questions and posing difficulties rather than stating anything definite, but the implications of what she says are pretty clear. I will make a couple of points, because you didn't come here for a philosophy lecture. I'm going to be here for hours. I'm going to be here for hours saying what's wrong with this stupid book. So she starts off the book by talking about feminism dealing with women as a sex class, but then assumes without visible argument, that trans women are women, and also amongst the most oppressed women. Now, I actually wouldn't have minded at all if she'd given an argument for why she thinks that trans women are women, because then you can get your teeth into it. That's what we want. We want arguments, but I can't find an argument. It's a conjuring trick. Look, no hands. Look, no argument. She's a philosopher, but she also touches on the cotton ceiling. Now, of course, as I said, the title's deliberately provocative. She's got a chapter on the right to sex and a second chapter where she responds to some of the criticism that she's had when the article with that title was first published. She doesn't think there is a right to sex because, of course, there can't possibly be a right to sex. But she uses sexual politics, basically drawing on the work of second-wave feminists, to suggest, in a nutshell, she's suggesting that since our sexual desires are linked to our politics, couldn't we just rethink them? Couldn't we just question their base? Of course, exactly the same could be said for people with penises who want to gain access to lesbians' knickers, but that doesn't really seem to be the implication. Although it's a bit hard to say, because the book is mostly a string of unanswered questions and suggestions. Let me just read out one little piece. She says, "The crucial question, in a sense, is whether a sexual aversion to women with penises is best explained by an unjustified transphobia or a justified wariness of men. But this is precisely the distinction that trans exclusionary feminists are unwilling to draw." So this basically amounts to the same old. Lesbians, be kind. Women, be kind. Lesbians, think about whether you're really lesbians. Because she doesn't actually say that because it's be too outrageous. But that's what I get from reading the book. But maybe I've misunderstood it. And of course, the lesbians who are being targeted do not need Srinivasan to tell them to think about sexual politics. They've already thought about it and know exactly what is going on. Bullshit, as described by the philosopher Harry Frankfurt in a now classic article, is when people pronounce preposterous claims that everybody knows are preposterous. We are not being reasoned with. We are not even being lied to. We are being bullshitted. So, what is my conclusion about the state of academic philosophy in 2021? This is what we need to do in order to be feted far and wide for our intellectual acumen. Do not argue your position. Simply state it. State it with supreme confidence, with utter conviction, and just argue any old bullshit. After all, nobody listens anyway. Not even in academic philosophy. We are back in the Athens that killed Socrates.
Thank you so much. Well, I must say, all that intellectual prowess and not an ontological argument in sight. How wonderful. Anybody else? I mean, Paul is a difficult act to follow. Do come in. We all want to be a little bit Paula.
I may lose my hat.
Well, we've all lost something.
Don't make me start giggling. Okay, I'm here to talk on behalf of people who can't speak openly because they will lose jobs. I'm talking about trade unions. So our sister, Fiona MacDonald, a committed trade unionist and feminist from the Paisley and District Trades Union Council, submitted a motion to the Scottish Trade Union Congress Women's Conference. The motion was as follows:
single-sex provision in women's frontline services. That this conference notes that the continued dilution of single-sex services supporting vulnerable women and girls has been promoted by most of Scotland's leading women's organisations. Many workers and users of frontline services are concerned about this trend. The Equality Act 2010 clearly states the position of sex as a protected characteristic, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission clarifies the legal exemptions which permit, where justified, services to women only. Offering a woman-only support service to victims of domestic violence who are women is likely to be justifiable even if there are no parallel services for men due to insufficient demand. That was a quote. The law aligns with the original feminist aims for women's services in Scotland. This conference supports the application of the exclusion of men to services specifically tailored for women and notes the legal provision allowing this provided by the EHRC/EA. This conference condemns the misstep of leading women's organisations within Scotland to protect this important provision in the EA, therefore failing to protect vulnerable service users and children. Calls on the Scottish Trade Union Conference Women's Committees to work with the General Council and its affiliates and employers to amend policies and practices relating to women's services to align with the EA provision and lawfully provide single-sex spaces run for and by women. Reaffirms the feminist principles on which women's service sector was formed, vows to fight cuts to service provision, to defend women-only services and to campaign for an extension based on needs. Notes that the Scottish Government's funding policies have driven change to the delivery of single-sex spaces and calls on them to analyse and publish the impact that current funding guidance has had on the delivery of single-sex provision. Future funding guidance should include advice about the legal exemptions to encourage development and take-up for single-sex provision. So that was the motion. The STUC Women's Committee opposed this motion. The motion was voted down. The committee issued a statement of opposition to the proposal, which said they were concerned at some of the content and alarmed at the language used, in particular the risk that the motion was misgendering trans women. This motion was about women. There was no mention of trans-identified males. They also suggested that it was too complicated to provide access to single-sex spaces, despite these spaces being in place since the pioneering refuges began in the 70s. How many women in trade union branches know that their unions refuse to support their single-sex exemptions? And how many women dare not raise these issues in their own union branches? Know this, women trade union members are mobilising. We will take collective action and we will push back. And if you'd like to get involved, you can... Yeah, damn right. Contact Fiona 44444, so that's Fiona and 5 4s on Twitter, and she'll give you more information should you want to get involved. Thank you.
Don't tell any secrets. You're like, right. Okay. Anyone else? This lady behind you, and then you're next. What a lovely t-shirt.
Favourite.
It's the iconic t-shirt of Amazing.
Be the billboard. Good morning, sisters. I have sinned. It has not been that long since my last transgression. And the men are angry and shouting at me. I have offended their new gods in a new way last night by questioning why children, some as young as 5, need to be discussing adult sexualities. It is the inclusion of adult sexualities for kids is coming under the guise of asexuality this time,
And as we've all seen the photos, asexuality is just as pornified and objectified as heterosexuality. So I would like to know why Girl Guides thinks this is a new badge they can do. You know, why is it that we're giving children who are yet to understand or feel rightly sexual desire an opportunity to decide and declare themselves that they either want sex or don't? You know, why is this conversation happening when they haven't even decided what options they want to take for a GCSE? So I'm quite happy not to worship at that altar, and if anyone else would like to come and help me burn their churches down, I think I need some assistance. Thank you.
Twitter. Oh, you've done already?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi. Can I pin it here?
Mm-hmm.
I have to put them both so it's secure.
Hello. I was just thinking, following the LGB conference, that we have to be really careful with our language more than ever. Sorry. What does it mean to be a woman? It gets more and more like women and men have got equal opportunities, and that's a good thing. But the things that you cannot ever get to be equal with men and women are having a period, having unwanted pregnancies, giving birth, and the consequences of that, which are normally taken on by the female, the mother, dare I say, and the proclivity for being sexually assaulted. And finally, having a physically weaker body in general. These are the things that can never be really changed about being a woman. You know, although they do try with massive amounts of inappropriate hormones to induce gynecomastia or whatever it's called. However, these men who want to be women, how do they represent womanhood? They don't seem to include any of those things that I've pointed out, which are specifically female, that we cannot get ourselves out of, really. It's dress, mannerisms, makeup, some sort of sexualization. What else do men who want to be women, how do they indicate that they want to be women? They can't menstruate. They can't be pregnant. They never need an abortion. They don't have the absolute responsibility that is felt by the mother of a neonate. They never have that absolute responsibility. They're never the first person a baby looks to. So how is that in any way being a woman? How are these men being a woman in any sense of the word? It's just complete madness. And so we need to think, when we say, oh, well, you know, just say she, because, you know, she actually looks like a female, you know, she looks like a woman, and she's ever so nice, you know, and she's all delicate. So let's call her she, you know. Well, no, because every time we use the word she for a male, we are taking away what being she actually means, which is all the things I mentioned at the beginning. And in addition, we're furnishing she with things that she does not represent, like clothes, mannerisms, sexualization. And so we must stop that dilution. It's not kind, it's unkind to women who have to, we have, most of us have suffered with the problems of menstruation, the danger, if not the actual reality of unwanted pregnancy, the responsibility of being a new mother, and the awful experience that many have had of being assaulted by a person who is much stronger than you. And so we need to think about compassion in speech in a different way than they would have us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay.
Anyone else? Waiting for a little bit of a legend. Come on. The Price is Right. Oh, can you? Sorry.
Oh, no, go fast. No, you go fast.
Yeah, you have to, because
No.
people with vaginas first.
Can I pin it on you? Is that? I think because otherwise it can be a bit loud. It can be a bit like broken. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and speak loudly. Hi, I'm from Fair Cop. Some of you will know we're a campaign group dedicated to stopping non-crime hate incidents. 200,000 incidents recorded so far. The last recorded hate incident that we know was reported last Friday to the police. This was the incident that was reported. On Friday the 29th, in the middle of a Get Stonewall Out protest, a group of women and some dinosaurs caught a bus. They went to continue their protest outside the stonewalled BBC. They were singing hateful songs such as the TERFs on the bus, if a person's got a penis, he's a man. And this incident was reported anonymously and duly logged as case number 3421, 29th of October 2021. Now you may be wondering where the police are getting the time to record all this nonsense. Well, the College of Policing has freed up some time. They have freed up time by completely ignoring women in their 5 monitored strands. They have chosen 5 strands from the Equality Act, which recognises 9 protected characteristics. And guess what's in the 4 they left out? Sex. Women. They've included gender identity, which isn't even in the 9 protected characteristics, and they've left out sex. Women. By ignoring sex in favour of gender identity, it means women are even more sidelined by the police. Or worse, we are actively pursued as hateful for standing up for our sex. Women, more often than not, are at risk of violence and abuse because of our sex. Horrific recent incidents have shown women are targeted and murdered because of our sex. Fair Cop has written a superb report, and it's out now, and I urge people to please go and read it. You'll find it fascinating and helpful. It's called The Invisible Strand. That's because that's what we are to the College of Policing. We are the invisible strand. It's gone out to every police and crime commissioner in the country, many MPs, relevant politicians, the Home Secretary and Inspectorate, and EHRC. Please send it to your MP as well, and your police and crime commissioner. It's got a brilliant foreword by Lisa Townsend, the PCC. Yep, the PCC for Surrey, who has the courage to speak out for women. Fair Cop want to get rid of all non-crime hate incidents because they're useless in combating real crime. But if we have to keep them, then sex must become a monitored strand. To quote Aretha Townsend, women need to know now more than ever that the police are on our side too. You can find the Invisible Strand on our tweet account at We Are Fair Cop, and on our website www.faircop.org. Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry. Thank you so much.
Just to remind you, it was 4 years ago today that, not today, last month, this month, that Susie Green reported me to the police for 6 tweets. And if you're just joining on the other side of the railings, this meeting is about the sex-based rights of women. And in the UK, if your mother, daughter, sister is arrested by an officer of the law who is a male, who is a man, who calls himself a woman, he is allowed to intimately search her body. So that is the law in this country. That's why we keep meeting here every month. If you go to a hospital in the United Kingdom and you expressly ask for a female member of staff to examine your female body, it is likely, it is possible that that female won't be a female at all but will be a man. It is likely that you could share your hospital ward, same-sex, single-sex hospital ward with a man, even if you object. Now that will include single-sex mental health, acute mental health wards. And if you complain as a mental health patient, you may find the word transphobic or bigot on your notes. And just to put everybody in the picture, the story I do like to tell is about the man who gets off wearing PVC nurse fetish gear in his spare time, is now actually running a female-only single-sex mental health ward. He's the head nurse, and on the first day on the job, he moved his office down to be near the women while they sleep. You can look him up. He's on YouTube in a really nice little chat about how much he cares for these women. And all the other women in the chat, drowning in cognitive dissonance, treat him as if he's a hero. I was party to a Zoom call by the UN that kept reinforcing the notion that soggy, sexual orientation, who you want to sleep with, and gender identity, what weird disconnect you have with whatever way you want to express yourself, is more important than biological sex. And you can look this up, it's on Facebook, literally women dealing in crisis zones like Haiti, World Crisis Zone, said that LGBT were the most vulnerable people in the world in these crisis zones. Not the children who were offered food to get raped by NGOs, not those children, not the women that are at threat of femicide and rape, not those people, but somebody, even a man, a grown man who happens to be gay, according to these people, are the most vulnerable people in war zones and crisis areas across the globe. And any voices of dissent, any comments, whether it was feminists talking about actually gay rights doesn't include the right to rent a woman's womb as a surrogate, they were completely deleted and we were banned from commenting. And this is the UN. Don't think that the feelers of this soggy, this Yoga Carter principle idea that women are not important and who men want to have sex with and what men want to wear isn't more important than us, because it is, and it's everywhere. So anytime you see these discussions, I would implore you just to make comment, just to have a look about how serious and embedded this absolute nonsense is. Like Paula says, it is the ultimate in bullshit. Would you like to speak?
Hello everyone, just to say you are all heroes to me, because what goes on here is women coming here, talking, and then you all go back to wherever you work, wherever you live, your families, and you tell other women. And that is so incredibly important, and I want to apologise on behalf of men, because we don't care. We just don't, and I'm sorry. And it's shocking and it's appalling. I spoke to a male Labour MP about this, who's gay, and asked him, what are you doing about it? And he said, well, these women are quite nasty, aren't they? That's what he said. He said, these women are quite nasty and they hurt feelings. I don't care about men's feelings when women are sharing prison cells with men. I care about safety. And I'm afraid too many hurt feelings are coming first. But the real thing I'm here to talk about today is the case of Caroline Louthbridge, the journalist who wrote the BBC article bravely about what lesbians are facing. Do you know she's had to delete her social media accounts because of the abuse she faces? Do you know that the BBC response, and I freedom of information them to get this, I said, what support have you offered her? Well, we may need to offer her training, was what they said. We may need to offer her training. I asked for what? They said because people are upset. Tough. You're a journalist, you tell stories. Your job is to upset people. You upset people who are powerful and you tell them the score, what these women are facing and why they are facing it. More importantly than this, I have a mole in the BBC Pride group. Now this is the Facebook group for BBC Pride employees. And some of the messages were quite incredible. They were saying that this woman had killed trans women. They said that she killed hundreds of trans women with her article. Now it was only last week, and the official death statistic for trans women since 2018 is 0. So I'm quite impressed by this. Now here's the problem here, and it all comes back to this. Stonewall. Stonewall have in their legal contract with organisations one thing. And this one thing is what I'll close in. If you want to speak to Stonewall and say we have a problem with a queer employee, queer, no mention of gay, no mention of lesbian, queer. If you have a problem with a queer employee, you don't go to your legal department. You don't speak to them. You don't speak to your MP or anyone who's an elected body. This is signed by governments, by the way. Government departments are sitting there. Department of Justice has withdrawn, but many others are sitting there. They don't go to their in-house legal department. They don't even go to the equality department. They don't go to the HRC. Who do you think they ask first for legal advice on an internal issue? Stonewall. This is written in. Stonewall say that if you freedom of information request them, doesn't matter. You have to ask Stonewall if you can release the information because it's under a confidentiality clause of commercial interest. So what they're saying is, oh well, if you want to freedomly apply an act of Parliament, it doesn't matter because Stonewall aren't actually affected by Parliament or your government organisation. You ask Stonewall for your instruction, not Parliament. Who has the right to tell you women not only that your say is nonsense, you shouldn't be allowed to speak, you should be punished by law, but the Parliament that you vote for doesn't matter. We matter. Men's feelings are all that matter on the board of Stonewall. So what I will say is this. The fight here is clear. It's with Stonewall. They are poisoning institutions and controlling them via legal warfare. They are coming for your rights, but they're also trying to take away any ability any organisation has to police themselves. And you guys, I have to say, although it may feel dark, and although sometimes you're not going to feel like you're winning, you are. Yeah. You're winning, you're changing opinions. There are women in Parliament who are coming up and saying, I think I might come to one of these events one day. So please keep going, don't stop. You are all my heroes. And if you do think about stopping, just think about, I am an adult gay male. I was told growing up that because I look like this, I was a woman. I'm not a woman. I'm an adult gay man, and the men who had a problem with how I looked needed to deal with it, not women who need to deal with men's feelings. It is men who need to do the process, men who cause the assaults, not TERFs. You kill nobody. You sit and talk. You share ideas. So please, for the children like me, who have grown up like this, keep the fight going. Thank you, everyone. Keep going.
Thank you, thank you. That was a lesson in a man talking in a way that is acceptable. Thanks, Robbie. I still felt completely centered as a woman in that talk. You know, it's really, just as an aside, it is really important, and I think some men take a little while to get to know this, but actually in this fight, the existential threat to women, the only place I have for men is here, not here. Never in front, always beside or behind. Let's not make that rude. Always beside or behind, standing beside us, amplifying our voices, not talking for us, which I think is often what happens in this struggle, and it annoys me. Anyway, one such woman who likes to speak for herself. Are you ready? She does a small campaign. I don't know what it is.
Like this tedious little.
Can I just?
Yeah, you may. It's fluffy. That's lovely.
Well, it's to stop the wind.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Kate from Keep Prison Single Sex. So. I'll talk to you later. That way. Okay, sorry. Right. So, as is my usual habit, I'm going to talk about women in prison. I'm also going to talk about the importance of language. Over the summer, I had lunch with a female former offender who'd recently been released from prison. During her sentence, she had moved around the female estate and had been housed in several different women's prisons. One of the things we talked about was her experience of being held with male prisoners who identify as transgender. For those who don't know, male prisoners have been held in women's prisons in England and Wales since at least the early 1980s. Although the criteria that permit this have changed over the years, the common factor permitting this is that these male prisoners identify as women. Another common factor is that the legitimate needs of women in prison to single-sex spaces for what should be obvious reasons of privacy, dignity and safety have been repeatedly and consistently minimised and ignored. I wanted to ask her what it was like being a woman held in prisons that are now mixed sex. I've been doing prisons for a while now, and although much of what she told me was not a surprise, it was still shocking and upsetting. She told me about the sexual assaults that she had both experienced and witnessed. She reported that sexually aggressive and physically threatening behaviour is run-of-the-mill and simply to be expected. She said that all bar one of the male prisoners she had encountered, who was so much bigger and stronger than she, had been convicted of sexual offences. She told me that almost all retained their male genitalia, and she knew they did because they often liked to show them off, either by wearing tight clothing or by moving the shower curtain to one side when showering. I knew this already, but it's very different when you hear it firsthand from a woman sitting across the table from you. Words on a page or numbers and percentages in a report are no substitute for hearing a woman describe what has happened to her and what she has witnessed happen to others. However, what really shocked me the most was when she told me in a completely matter-of-fact voice, "We have to call them she and use their female names, and if we don't, we get a punishment." Even the ones who are sexual offenders? Yes. Even the ones who show off their penises in the shower with you? Yes. If we don't, we get a punishment. I'm firmly of the opinion that the policy and practice of housing male prisoners who identify as transgender alongside women constitutes an unofficial punishment directed against female offenders and only against female offenders. Whilst male prisoners who fulfil the necessary criteria are housed alongside women, no female prisoner who identifies as transgender is ever held in the male estate. Somehow, when making decisions about who's allowed in men's prisons, the prison service can see that sex is immutable and matters. In prison, as in the outside world, men get to keep their single-sex spaces. It's women's spaces that become mixed sex. Being held in a mixed-sex institution is not a normal consequence of lawful detention. Neither is facing an increased risk of both sexual assault and sexual assault by a male. nor is the psychological and emotional harm inflicted upon female offenders when they are housed with males. Throughout the criminal justice system, women in prison are recognised as being traumatised, vulnerable, and are often the victims of far more serious, usually violent or sexual offences than those they have been convicted of. This unofficial punishment has another dimension, and a particularly sinister one at that: the punishment of compelled and coerced speech, the punishment of indoctrination. I'm sure some will counter that if you're in prison you don't get to complain. We all know the saying, if you can't do the time then don't do the crime. To this I say, it is imprisonment, the deprivation of liberty, the removal from society, the loss of time that is the punishment. Imprisonment is not a means to enable a punishment to be inflicted. Convicted offenders who receive a custodial sentence are sent to prison as punishment, not for additional punishment. This process of indoctrination, and it really is indoctrination, you're required to only speak approved words to describe a reality that conforms to an approved ideology, robs women in prison of their language, their concepts, their experiences. It's a particular cruelty to women in prison. The data consistently report that female offenders have experienced high rates of violence and sexual assault at the hands of men, often since childhood. Women in prison know all too well who is a man, who is male, and which of the two sexes presents the greater risk. However, the male prisoner, the man, becomes the risk that cannot, must not be identified. The woman I met told me that female offenders generally don't complain because there's simply no point. But if a woman did make a complaint about the actions of a male prisoner, she would have to use female pronouns and that prisoner's chosen female name. But it wasn't a woman who was aggressive to her, or threatened her, or assaulted her, or showed her his penis. It just wasn't. It was an adult human male. It was a man. The language she's compelled to use means that she's forced to describe an incident that involved a woman. She's forced to agree that this prisoner is a woman, is female. This is not just denial of freedom of speech, this is compelled speech. This is forcing women to affirm an ideology. Remember, if we don't, we get a punishment. Since my lunch with the female former offender, the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that women in prison are expected to use correct, as they put it, pronouns, and may be punished for refusing to comply. In a reply to a written question, Lord Wolfson explained that it's only where a woman makes, as he termed it, an honest mistake in using incorrect pronouns that she can be assured that she will not suffer a penalty. An honest mistake? What about an intentional choice of language to refer to the adult human male she sees before her? What about a refusal to affirm gender identity ideology? Post-Forstater, gender-critical beliefs are protected under the Equality Act 2010 and have been deemed worthy of respect in a democratic society. But what protection does this give the woman in prison? Many who consider preferred pronouns to be a matter of courtesy and a kindness still draw a line in the sand and decline to use these to refer to a male, particularly one who's been convicted of violent and sexual offences, particularly if the very ability to commit these offences is intrinsically tied to the biological fact of being male. But pronouns are not prizes, nor are they rewards for good behaviour. They are neutral, with no value judgment attached. Womanhood is not an honorarium to be bestowed on those males who are somehow deserving. Pronouns just are, and womanhood just is. It may not surprise you to learn that I won't use preferred pronouns ever, nor will I use the term trans woman or any of the current variants. My reasons for this are informed by the requirements for safeguarding and my refusal to endorse gender identity ideology, even whilst expressing disagreement. Material reality matters, and I make the choice that my language shall be free of concepts belonging to an ideology with which I most strenuously disagree. Now I have another reason. I have freedom of expression, but women in prison don't. In standing by my choice, I honour the fact that I, unlike them, have that freedom to insist on reality and reject ideology. But remember, for the women in prison, if we don't, we get a punishment.
Sectional, thank you very, very much. Very, very much. Okay, I'm trying to draw this out because we are anticipating the arrival of the most bigoted of women any minute. So I will, that's not her. There's a jogger over there, that's not her. That would be most surprising. Kate mentions courtesy and kindness. I actually think every time we think of courtesy and kindness of a preferred pronoun, whatever that means, calling a man with female language. Ooh, ducks.
They want to speak.
Ducks over there are often rapists, and they rape their female partner to death sometimes. So hooray for ducks. What we often feed the ducks is if they're these lovely, wonderful, and they're really violent. Mean, really, yeah, horrible things. Only mallards, not all ducks, not all ducks. Not all ducks. Okay, so yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I sort of feel every time I hear female language used for a man, it genuinely makes me feel almost as viscerally kind of yuck as a pride flag. I don't think so. Not today. Today is not my day. And I think it's really important that we challenge people that are supposed to be speaking for women, that we continually challenge them when they use, as Julia Long would call, the language of our oppressor. It's really, really important. If somebody is taking a platform at a conference that may or may not be exciting, if they're taking a platform there and they are using the language of our oppressor, and I don't mean the LGB Alliance conference, I mean other conferences or events with solid single colours, but if they are doing that, then they're not really speaking for you, they're speaking for themselves. That is what I think. I think if you speak for yourself, you can speak and you can use whatever language you like, but if you claim to speak for women, don't you dare use the language that at the moment is being used to take away our rights. It's not okay. It's not okay to say the word trans woman as if that man is a subset of woman. That is not okay. And if people are doing that because they've made an ontological position that creates an environment in which they feel it's an all right thing to do, then I promise you they are not speaking for you. They are speaking from a place of self-investment and self-interest. It's not about speaking for women. If you want to have courage and speak for women, then you speak for us properly in language that we approve of, and that isn't female language for men. Who else would like to fill some time? Anybody? Come on. Bradley, you're not going to talk? Come on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lovely. Thank you.
Hello. Is this working?
Yeah.
Hello. I want to say something about Shiloh Jolly Pitt, because she's been in the news a lot this week, and I was going to blog about her, but I don't have time, so I'm not. But I just noticed how, firstly in January, she was photographed wearing shorts and a little ponytail, and everyone went bonkers over it. Now she's worn her mum's dress to the ball, and everyone's going, oh, she's a little mini-me, isn't she wonderful? And this is the same press that was so desperately behind the idea that she was really a boy and we had to support her being a boy, and famous trans people were reaching out to her, like I believe Cher's child was reaching out to her so she could express herself, and the press has that's not mentioned in any way, this massive elephant in the room, that here we have a child who from a very, very young age has wanted to use a boy's name, has liked boys' toes, has worn boys' clothes, and suddenly she's going through puberty and she's not that bothered about doing these things anymore. And I'm not trying to applaud her for having worn this wonderful Dior dress or anything at all. I'm just saying, why is this press that was so quick to follow these things and report on it, why are they not talking about what we've probably got here is a classic case of a child who was consistent, persistent and insistent, who has desisted, and nobody apart from Julia Robertson in America in January seems to be addressing this. So I thought I would just fill that little gap. And also all the talk about Angelina wanting to transition Shiloh, you cannot find anything about that if you look at actual quotes from her. She has never referred to her daughter as her son. It is not all Brad saving the child, which I've seen a lot of women online saying as well. The kid was supported and loved and allowed to wear what she wanted and did what she wanted, and she grew out of it, and that really does need to be addressed. Yes, it does. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, so a lady came up to me earlier who is part of the WI, and she wanted to know how, and I thought maybe we could have, like all the kids call it, hive mind. Maybe we could have some ideas about what you've done in a reasonable kind of work or community situation which has enabled you to convince people that have been suckered into this be kind nonsense, and you've convinced them otherwise that actually women's lives are and our rights are under threat from the inclusion of men. And so when I was at an event and there were a few really lovely, very much older ladies as part of the WI, and they sort of said that Dorothy's husband had transitioned and how difficult it was for her, meaning him, how difficult it was for him, and really focused on him. And then I said, what about Dorothy? And it was like nobody had even thought, because actually the dutiful wife will just go along with whatever the men say. So I wondered if anybody had any sort of anecdotal, you don't have to come on camera if you don't want, any anecdotal sort of things that have happened to you where you've managed just to change the view of the room or the group or community. Oh, you're eating Frazzles. Or community. No thanks. Or community that you're engaged in. Has anyone got any suggestions? Yes. Do you want to come and talk on here again? Thank you. Because I think people need some sort of real life examples.
I spoke to a colleague who was delivering a session about gender identity to our work, and I turned to him and I said, what does cis mean? What does gender identity mean? And he turned to me and he said, oh, it's your presentation, it's how you present. So I turned and was like, okay, how does a butch lesbian then differ from a non-binary woman? And he just looked at me and he said, oh, I don't know that. And I said, and I don't call myself cis, because that means as a woman I identify with being submissive and feminine and heterosexual. And he turned to me, he's a gay man, and he said, but I'm not heterosexual. Should I be calling myself cis? And I was like, oh no, you can make your own choice there as to what language you want to refer to yourself as, but that's what the word means. And I'm now delivering that session because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Okay, Georgia, can we have an ETA? Can we have an update? Julia, where is she? Is she coming? Do you want to talk? So we could talk amongst ourselves. I mean, I could carry on.
No, just to further on from my last speech on how transgenderism is a religion. Are you beginning to see the patterns and signs now? That religion intends to change scriptures and replace existing religions, which we know are all patriarchal religions. And the church must resist this vehemently, whether they use theology as an argument or whether they use Platonic arguments. We need to stop this, because we can't have a religion which is actually basically ingrained in all our institutions now and affecting everybody's lives. And we must not allow this whole transgender business to distract us from what is actually going on in the real world, in terms of the National Health Service. Right, because people are being killed off in the National Health Service and the way they're downsizing it, especially the elderly. And I'm not necessarily talking about COVID. I'm talking about every single service that's provided, whether it's in the rehab units or in dentistry. People are being neglected and are being killed off. Now, if they kill off the good staff as well because they're not being vaccinated, that's going to cause serious problems, because what you're getting there really, you're employing the woke into positions, and they're already tribal in the sense that we know they've misused policies like intersectionality, which basically advantages the most advantaged, right? So we are actually forgetting the real work that needs to be done here in prisons. Right? How on earth are they allowing rapists in women's prisons? I mean, that's unheard of. It's ridiculous, right? And while the Tories want to play this bloody game till 2024, the next election, we're not going to have it. We want change now. And if you don't change, we'll unseat you all.
Thank you. Oh, I'd love you to. Thanks so much.
Hello.
So if you could kind of, you don't have to look right, you can stand wherever you like.
Okay, yeah, so I wasn't going to speak, but apparently we've got some extra time. Just over 20 years ago, I attended the Houses of Parliament to listen to a speech about single-sex psychiatric wards, because I was one of 4 women who had spent a lot of time in psychiatric wards, and we had been raped, we had been beaten, we had been used to everyday bullying and abuse by male patients on wards, because in those days all psychiatric wards, the acute wards, the intensive care units, they were all mixed sex. And the argument they gave us was that we want you to live in a normal world, and in a normal world there aren't women only spaces. You have to mix with men, even violent, psychotic men who had convictions for rape, who had convictions for violence against women. Even those men you had to be with. Now these are wards with 20, 25 people in them, all severely distressed, all heavily medicated, and we were all together. And they said also women civilised the men. So women's presence on these wards made the men behave in a more civilised way. After some of us, I was battered senseless by a male patient, other women had been raped, a group of us got together and we campaigned successfully to separate the sexes on psychiatric wards, on acute psychiatric wards. Now don't forget that women on psychiatric wards and the men, it's not like an ordinary hospital. You don't just go in, stay for a few days and say, okay, I feel better, I'm leaving. A lot of people are sectioned, so you're there for months at a time and you cannot leave. Often you can't even leave the actual ward to go out into the grounds. Sometimes you can, other times you can't, and people wander around. There are no guards watching what people are doing. The nurses are often in their nurses station and people are just running around doing what they want to do, generally being disturbed and distressed. So we succeeded in getting single-sex wards. I now find, I haven't been in hospital for, I think the last time I was in was about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, and they're a mess. They've got hardly any staff. What staff they've got are not properly trained, and now they're bringing men back into the wards, and I'm hearing constantly about men in the psychiatric wards. Some of them apparently are lovely, they're lovely. But I don't think you're lovely if you're a man going into a women's psychiatric ward. There's nothing lovely about that. Others are not so lovely. Others are masturbating. Oops. Masturbating in front of the, can you hear me? In front of the women patients. They're sexually harassing women, and there's just general bullying. The men decide what you're watching on television. If they don't like where you're sitting, if you're sitting on the best seat, you're moved. It's just constant bullying, and we're back in that awful situation where men are on psychiatric wards, and if you misgender the men, you're a bigot, and that may well be put on your medical records that you're a transphobe and a bigot. I recently went to a crisis service, and they're very lovely people running it, and I was asked, are you female? Look at me, I'm sitting in front of them, look at me, are you female? I had to confirm that I was a woman to them. It is appalling, it is outrageous, you know, I just want to talk, because people don't hear much about what's going on in psychiatric wards. Psychiatry is something that goes on behind closed doors, and by the way, psychiatry is a rogue profession. That's why we've got all this rubbish about gender dysphoria and young lesbians being told to have their breasts removed and God knows what else. This is psychiatry. This is a medical model of mental distress when these are just children who don't fit into the restrictions of society, and they're given a psychiatric diagnosis. We can do away with psychiatric diagnosis. So psychiatry is a rogue profession. And remember, when a woman goes into a psychiatric ward in a state of distress, please don't say she's going into the best possible place and she will get the best possible care, because the chances are that she will be put on a lifelong pathway of heavy duty psychiatric drugs that she won't be able to come off of. I was given electric shock therapy. This was 20 years ago. I still have memory problems. So it is not a good place to be. A psychiatric ward, these are not lovely NHS hospitals. They are not good places, and they've now got, once again, they've got men in them. And if you come, no, just one last thing. If you go into a ward and you are, say, having some delusional thoughts, you go in and you say, look, I'm the Virgin Mary, or I'm Jesus Christ, or I'm an airline pilot, let me fly the planes. They will say, no, you're not. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. But if you see a man sitting in the ward and you say, there's a man over there, they'll say, no, there isn't. You're mad. There's not. You're a bigot. That's a woman. You know, this is the crazy situation we're in. And so I just, you know, I wasn't going to speak today, and I don't really speak much about this, but we do hear a lot about the men in different places where they shouldn't be, and I just want to be one of the few people, as far as I'm aware, that's speaking about the predicament of women in psychiatric wards. And I would just say another thing, that most women now are on section in the psychiatric wards because there are so few beds on the wards that you really have to be in a very bad way to be there, so you are being detained against your will with nasty, horrible men. So, thank you.
Right, we've got somebody who wants to talk but doesn't want to be on camera. If you just stand there. Stand there. If you stand in front of it, because the lens is here, okay? Just don't move backwards or you're screwed.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about therapy. I'm a therapist, and I'm currently going through a disciplinary process for not agreeing to the affirmative model. I'm part of a group called Thoughtful Therapists, who set up in April this year. Thank you. Didn't know so many people would have heard of us. That's great. No, it's really great to hear that so many people know about what we're doing. The whole problem with therapy in this country and around the world is that we're being forced to not act in the way that we were trained to work. You know, we're expected just to agree with people when they come into the therapy room. That's not what therapy does. The whole point of therapy is that when a person comes into the room, they have all kinds of beliefs about the world and about themselves, and they're causing problems in their lives. That's why they've come to therapy, to try and make sense of them. You have to help them look at what's underneath the surface, what's unconscious, not what they're conscious of, what's unconscious. That's how I'm trained, and I've worked for 27 years doing that with great results. Now, you know, all around the world they're bringing in legislation about conversion therapy, which is added in gender identity into the mix alongside lesbian and gay conversion, and it's made a complete nonsense of the policies and the principles that we work with. In Australia, the law that is already up and running, you know, people are stopping being therapists. The therapists are just putting down their tools and saying, I'm not doing this anymore. It's too dangerous because there's no definitions of what it would mean to convert someone, and therefore anybody can come into the therapy room and go home and think, that therapist tried to make me think this. That's rubbish. It's about personal perception of what you're doing. It's not defined properly by law. So I would really encourage you to try and speak up right now. There's a consultation process going on for 6 weeks with the UK government on conversion therapy. You can make a contribution to that. Contact your MP. If you want to know more about it, look on our Twitter feed, Thoughtful Teas, or our website, thoughtfultherapist.org. We've got a whole load of stuff on there. We had a webinar last Saturday, which is on YouTube, and it's called We Need to Talk About the Memorandum, which is the Memorandum of Understanding on Conversion Therapy. It's already started. Before this is in, it's already started. You know, James Esses, who's my colleague in Thoughtful Therapists, you may know about him. Yeah, he's doing a crowdfunder campaign now because he was studying in his 3rd year of his 5-year training to be a therapist, just because he put up the petition on about protecting, safeguarding therapy for young people. He was chucked off his course. And he's now found out through Freedom of Information requests all kinds of terrible things about who was behind that. And it's the usual trans activist suspects. You know, they're all in there, the big names that we all probably know about. Well, I do anyway, in the therapy world. And you know, the same things happened to me just because I posted information about what we were doing on Twitter. I've been taken through a disciplinary process with my regulatory body. They had the panel meeting last Friday, 3 people without me. I don't no idea who those people are, whether there's trans activists, I don't know. But the situation is now they've got 14 days to tell me the outcome. 27 years as a practicing therapist, I may well be terminated. That's the result. So please get behind us. We are desperately trying to get this message across that therapists need to be allowed to practice as therapists and not dictated to by laws that make no sense whatsoever. Thank you.
She needs no introduction. She's a friend to Lisa Nandy. She's first and foremost, she's my friend. I feel she does some feminism or something. Anyway, Julia Long, everyone.
Money in the hat, money in the hat.
Let me pin this so everyone can hear you at home.
I'm very sorry, I'm like 2 hours late, I think. It's not my ontological position, it's my chronological position. It's not even that, it's a bad joke. Okay, are you ready for a bit of a sing song? Yeah! You just have to go la 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 la, okay? I wrote it on the train, so it's a bit unpolished. It's from the heart, but maybe not so much from the brain. Okay. Transphobe in the pub. Tra la 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 la. There's a transphobe in the pub. We must all denounce a transphobe in the pub. Tra la 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 la. She looked up and said, no, 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 no. Marginalise her. Tra la 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 la. We must marginalise her. Said some bloke on Twitter, marginalise her. Tra la 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 la. Does anybody know who he is or care? When a woman says no, I wish I had a good voice. When a woman says no, things start getting pretty real. When Kellie-Jay says no, things start getting pretty real. Oh fuck, terrible. All the men should take note. There's a Penny Jackson in each of us. All the men, who's been watching the news? All the men should take note. There's a Penny Jackson in each of us. Penny Jackson
free that woman now. Come on, Penny Jackson said no to her abuser. I hope you've been reading the papers. Tra-la-la-la-la, and sack that bastard judge. Sack him now. Penny Jackson, I hope that you can hear. Yes, I hope you can hear us. We love Penny Jackson, Penny Jackson. I hope that you can hear. We all stand by your side. Minimum sentence, 18 fucking years. Are you fucking joking? Sack that bastard judge. Don't give up, Penny. Your team will get you out, and we will stand with you. Yes, we will. Killer John Broadhurst, he's already out, and that bastard Sam Piper's got 4 years and 8 months. Anthony Williams, that killer, got 5 years. Those judges love men who kill. Yes, they do. Transphobe in the pub. Tra-la-la-la-la. We're all transphobes in the pub. Yes, we all are transphobes in the pub. Tra-la-la-la-la. We look up and say, no, 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 no. Penny Jackson, free that woman now. Come on, Penny Jackson, free that woman now. Penny Jackson, free that woman now, and sack that bastard judge. Sack him now. Transphobe in the pub. There's lots of transphobes in the pub. We are many, they're few transphobes in the pub. We look up and say, no, no, do. Free Penny Jackson! Woo! Viva the transphobe! Woo! That is just my ontological position.
Well, I'm glad to see that was worth waiting for. Right. Anyone else? Okay, so on the advice of Julia, we can be transphobes in the pub. Look, basically, if you don't think women have penises, you are, in today's money, a transphobe. And so I'm very proud to be one. Thanks to the random incel on Twitter, who definitely will cut that little bit out of this whole thing, which saves me a job, to be fair, because often what they think they do is they cut something that's really damning, and I'm like, I sound quite good. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. We are going to continue through the winter to keep meeting, because I think actually it's just so healthy to keep having these free events where everybody is invited to speak. There's no hierarchy. Maybe there's no hierarchy. Everybody's opinion is valid and can be listened to. We don't have a wonderful plinth on which special people can sit and tell you exactly what to think. That is not the way that Standing for Women works. The way I think that all activism should work, is you bring whatever you bloody well want to the table, and we will find a way of using it, because each and every one of you that just even stands in silence, even if you don't even talk to the person next to you, you make a difference. You make it easier for other people to speak out. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, everyone. I don't even know how to switch it off.